Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speaker for today's session, Mr. Ranjan Kaul. One of the things that struck me while reading about Ranjan's professional journey, and even most of I got to spend some time with him in the last few days, is that his career has never followed a single predictable path. His education and professional journey has been remarkably interdisciplinary, spanning different roles, different fields, and different ways of thinking. In many ways, I think his journey reflects something that we deeply value at Kriya, the interwoven learning and where different disciplines and different ways of engaging with the world come together to deepen our understanding of it. Ranjan's journey has taken him from engineering at IIT Kanpur to product design at IIT Bombay to the study of English literature at the University of Delhi. And of course, he went on to be one of the world's most respected publishing houses as the managing director of Oxford University Press India before transitioning to becoming a full-time professional artist in 2015. Today, he's not only a contemporary visual artist, but also a curator, art critic, author, and storyteller. Whether through painting, sculpture, performance art, or writing, his work consistently engages with questions of society, humanity, and the world we inhabit. His artworks have been exhibited across India and internationally, and his writing spans art criticism, fiction, and literary and academic publishing. But beyond these impressive professional milestones, what I especially appreciate about Ranjan is his intellectual curiosity, his passion for art, and I think the generosity with which he wants to share his ideas with others. So please give a huge round of applause and welcome him.
Oh, thank you. That's okay. Okay, thanks. I will, as I briefly mentioned, I'll divide this talk into roughly two parts. The first part will be the emergence of modern art, and because modern art roughly 1850s to 1960s, and then contemporary art, we would say from the mid 1960s to date. So because contemporary art came on the heels of modern art, so one has to trace that evolution. So that's why the subtitle Evolution and Practice, So now also what I need to also differentiate is the difference between modern art and contemporary art, because they're often and erroneously used interchangeably. So when people generally talk about modern art, and they seem to be talking about contemporary art, and when people are talking about contemporary art, they seem. So I'll try to differentiate what is the difference, both in terms of course, in terms of timing is one, but in terms of style and the approach to art. So because and what fuels this confusion is very often curators and gallerists, they will show a work by a living artist and say this is contemporary art because it's done by a contemporary artist, a living artist. But that does not make it contemporary art, is my contention, because if they're done in a modernist idiom, it's like, and of course, a lot of art we see, I would, to be polite, just call it wall decor, where the gallerists and the interior designers and they work together and they say, so you do art which will do up a room along with the sofas and the drapery. But I would not call that either modern art or contemporary art, because both of them have very specific characteristics and conditions, and we need to understand that. So I'll come to the slide now. So modern art and contemporary art, often we have talked about this. So we've talked about this as well. So each has specific characteristics. Art done in modernist style or even folk and tribal art, even if it is done by a living artist, will not make it contemporary art. And we'll see why. Nor is the public art we see on streets and subways. So some municipal bodies, just to beautify streets nowadays, will do art. Now, we can't call that contemporary art. Although there is a history of street art called graffiti, as you know. And there's an anonymous artist called Bansky, well, Reuters claims they know his identity, but he has not acknowledged that identity. Now, he does, and he's well known because it was this graffiti was actually popular. It began as gang-based spray painting in the streets of New York. And then Bansky emerged from the underground in Bristol in the 1990s. And his most famous work, if you just Google later, not now, is Flower Thrower, where he called it Love in the Air, which was done in 2003. It depicted a mass protester, throwing a bouquet of flowers. Now, bouquet of flowers instead of a kind of a incendiary bomb, a weapon. And incidentally, it may interest some of you if you are on Insta. There is a graffiti artist, Indian, based in Bombay, called Tyler Street Art, who does something very similar, and he's been doing it for the last 10 years on the streets of Bombay. So it's called Tyler Street Arts, if you are curious to know what. So even Bansky, what he used to do is surreptitiously go in the nights, and he used a multi-layered stencil technique. He invented that so he could get speed and efficiency. So quickly with a stencil, 2-3 stencils, rapidly painted within minutes, the entire graffiti was ready, and then he would disappear. So now let us look at the emergence of modern art. So this was a period, if some of you are familiar with history, it was a period of industrial, socio-political change. It was a technological change. There was the Industrial Revolution happening. This was also the period when the 2 world wars happened. So a lot of change was happening. It was this very period that saw the advent of photography. So portraiture now had to take a back seat. Not all portraiture died, but a lot of portraiture were used to get likenesses of royalty and nobility. That had to change because now there was photography. There was also the advent of film. So you had mass entertainment. So art had to undergo some changes. And there was declining patronage of the church, the nobility, the royal courts. They were not sponsoring. So artists now had to look at new markets. So they had to, now who were the new markets? They were the nouveau-riche buyers and collectors who had benefited from the Industrial Revolution. And they were young people. They were looking for brighter colors. And they were quite happy to focus on, move away from religious and allegorical themes, mythological themes, into everyday life, painting nature, beauty. So this is the background how modern art emerged. So the modern artists then rejected realism and representational imagery. So they were looking for people buying them for their homes, just like we're looking at it now. And so artists were free to experiment with form, color, texture. And much of modern art emerged in France and Germany. So the doctrine, l'art pour l'art, art for art's sake. So you don't care about any thematics like that, or even commentary on society. And that became the central doctrine. And so a more open competitive market, because they had to move away from patronage. And that emerged, and a multiplicity of audiences emerged. There were art salons where like artists themselves started presenting works to markets. And many of them were successful. And finally, this is important, because there was a lot of freedom, there were disruptor artists like Marcel Duchamp. I don't know if you've heard of or seen his work. Well, I'll show you. With his ready-mades, question the very definition of art. So this is what he presented. It is a male urinal, so don't get upset about it. And he put it upside down, so it's all right. He signed it Armat, which was the name of the manufacturer. And he gave it to a gallery, and and he said, "This is my work of art." This was not the first work he had done. he had been doing ready-made. So his first ready-made was done in 1913. He had taken a bicycle, the front wheel of a bicycle, put it upside down. Then he would go to shopping mall, pick up random things. They were not random. He said, these are chosen by me. So because they're chosen by me, these are not found objects. These are art objects. So this was a bottle rack, for example. So, and he called that fountain. He didn't call it a urinal. And this he called, of course, this was, he gave a French name for it. So now this, we can question, is this art? But this completely changed the very definition of art. And that's why I've spent some time talking about him. So these are movements you would be familiar. You would have seen some of these paintings. So I'll go through this rapidly. So the Impressionists like Manet, they used loose brushwork and they played with light, the transient effects of light and shade. And the post-impressionist, Van Gogh was very familiar. Edvard Munch, who was a post-impressionist, the Scream is very popular. I'm sure many of you have seen it. And then there were abstractionists, abstract art which has come in, like Kandinsky, Mondrian, Pollock. Pollock, he was a person who did action painting. So you take a tub, throw paint around. So many things like that was happening at that time. And then there was surrealism, So you had people like Dali, who juxtaposing and there was the influence of Freud. Freud was also around that same time. So you look at subconscious, you look at dreams, you look at irrationality, and then there was. So this was also the time we had talked about the wars. So there was a lot of parallel movements in literature and philosophy. In fact, there were a lot of influence and there was a lot of interaction. So thought process like nihilism, existentialism, and I'll not go into what were the parallel. And a lot of art got painted like that. So a lot of art also illustrated some of that. But so there was absurdity. There was this feeling that life is meaningless. So why paint something which has meaning? So it challenged traditional culture. So this is, I've specifically a lot of young girls here. So this is a work by Berthe Morisot. She was one of the founding people in the French, among the Impressionist school, but not very well known. But I like her work. But this is typical of French Impressionism, because you see the brushstrokes and you see the delicate palette. And of course, it's an everyday scene, And this is Matisse. Now, and this is the artist as a model. This is another thing. The modern artists got obsessed with the nude. So you'll have many like Renoir and people who painting nudes. Because today they are critiqued for their misogynist kind of approach, but that time they talked about beauty and sensation and the nude body. So now, of course, if you're familiar with ways of seeing John Berger, he has critiqued half his book is around this kind of representation. And this is a very famous work by Edvard Munch. Now here he goes into the subjective side, the emotion. It's not Munch, it's Munch, sorry. Then of course we had Cubism, abstraction. Picasso is known, but it was actually Braque who worked very closely with Picasso in Cubism. And he went on working with Cubism, even though Picasso went ahead to change and went on exploring, but Braque stuck to Cubism. And then you had Kandinsky and so many other abstractionists who, now there is some semblance of a flood, the biblical flood, but you can barely make it out. He just titled it Composition. Now, at the same time, there were some artists who did not subscribe to this doctrine of art for art's sake, and they felt they should even Picasso himself, there were some works where he commented on what was happening in contemporary times, which a lot of contemporary art is like that. And that's why I'm bringing it up. So you have, of course, Guernica, which all of you know. It was his response to the Spanish Civil War. But this is another very great German artist called Kate Kollwitz, who this particular work, she was not German. She shifted, but she was a Prussian artist. And this is a part of she did a series of etchings. There was an uprising in Prussia amongst the weavers, and they were starving and there were drastic wage cuts. So she had done this. This is at the weavers at the gate of the factory they worked in. And this was another Max Beckmann. He's another artist who worked on allegorical themes, but you see, he talked about society and how people wear masks. Even amongst all of us, we wear masks. And now in the social media, you have many more like that happening. So that's why he calls it actors, right? Now let's look at rapidly. I think modern art in Indian artists you may be more familiar with. So now this emerged again in the late 19th century, about the same time, and there were art institutions. Now, it was the British, the colonial people, who established these art institutions. So obviously, the students would follow what they were taught. But there was a combination of colonial influences. Now, there was a difference between colonial art and German and French artists. So the training our students got was a mix of colonial influence, modern art, of course, and, of course, then modern art as it emerged, where the Indian artists, they wanted to incorporate some Indian traditions from folk art and tribal art. So it is like a mix. At the same time, I must point out, the market was mostly in the West. So whatever they did, and so they did biblical themes. Which has, we have Christianity here, but that is not a prevailing theme here. But they did that because they had an eye on that market. So, of course, Raja Ravi Verma is well known in the South, the Kerala person, and all these people. In Chennai, you had K.C. Panikkar, who founded the Chola Mandala. I believe this is like on its last legs, somebody was saying.
Complicated.
Oh, it's complicated. Okay. So these were, I won't go details about that. Abhindranath Tagore, he did that Bharat Mata. I'll show you the image of that. And so there were two parallel movements in Bengal. There was the Shantiniketan school, and there was this, the Shantiniketan was actually mentored by Rabindranath Tagore. And Abhindranath was different. He was a brother. And then you had Jamini Roy, Amrita Shergill, you all have heard of Satish Gujral, Subramaniam, and many others. I mean, I'm not mentioning all of them. But Raja Ravi Verma is important because what he did, he democratized art consumption. I don't know if you people know, at that time, the Hindu deities, the images which were done, were not widely circulated. They were limited to the more Brahmanical elite order. So the lower social order, lower castes, were not supposed to even have them. Of course, he got critiqued by the Brahmanical class because he painted the deities as ordinary folk, rather than having that very aura kind of thing. So, but he did very affordable prints, and so that is his major contribution. Otherwise, he also did oil paintings and landscapes and things like that. But he kind of did a mix again of Western art and indigenous traditions. And of course, you had these Bombay Progressive Artist Group. And they had diverse styles, but they were trying to create art which was more progressive. So you see, you must keep in mind, I don't know if you have got a slide on that. In India, there is no history of painting on canvas. So we have a history of temple architecture, we have murals. There were folk art and tribal art, which is done on, handmade paper using organic materials. But oil painting per se was not known in this country. It only came with the British. So that's why we don't have a real history of that kind of painting. But yeah, we have a history of art, and there is a long, bigger history of architecture and that kind of thing, but not oil painting per se. So at the same time, there was some social political art also done. Satish Gujral. In his earlier days, later he moved on into doing more decorative stuff, I would say. But this is a work on the Indian partition. He did a lot of work in Mexico. His formative years were spent in Mexico after his art school education. So the style is reminiscent of some of the Mexican artists, but also very expressionist, as you can see. In expression in the sense of evoking feeling and emotion. And this is Chitta Prasad. So there was a flood which was followed by a famine, the Great Bengal famine, it's known. So Chitta Prasad did a series of woodcuts on that. All of you are familiar with woodcut printing? Anybody not familiar? I'll explain. All of you are familiar. Thank you. And then, of course, you had Amrita Shergill. This is Rabindranath Tagore. So he did this is well known as Bharat Mata now, but initially he called it Bongo Mata. And later it became a more universal kind of art for India. And so he's trying to kind of juxtapose Western idea with Indian folk art, as did Amrita Shergill. So if you see her, the way she does the arms and figure is reminiscent of Ajanta. So she brought on those kind of things. And Jamini Roy, again, he brought in the folk tradition into the art. But they all were trained in Western art schools. And Thea Mehta is now the highest selling artist today. So, and this is done more recently. So this is Mahi Sura. So, there is this mythological battle between this Asur and the bull, so as you can see. Now, there is a lot of minimalist work in the sense that the colors are flat and yet you can see the emotion. Now, this is a very important movement for contemporary art. It roughly in the 1950s, 60s, this emerged and it became a radical fringe movement as a response to the modernists believed that everything should be new. So they said, why? So they said, there are universal truths. There's no universal truth, And so they talked about pure art. So they contested all that. And then they also said that art was getting away from, it was becoming too exclusive, too distant from the common person. So they brought in popular culture, they brought in pastiche, they brought in pluralism, and it attacked modern art for its distancing from everyday life. So there was, I'll show you images of their works if you're not familiar. Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, they drew imagery from mass media, from packaging, from advertising. So whatever was around, what people were seeing, what you see in shopping malls, and said this is art. Because this is, so why do you say that this is not art? And then we'll talk about Kossuth later, because he shifted the focus from till now, art was still a physical object. So okay, I can say this is art, but still it is a physical art object. What happens if it becomes an idea? What happens if it becomes a concept? It's like an installation, or nowadays it's like a performance art. What happens there? It's no longer a physical art object. And what happens if you add text to it? What happens if you add language to it? What happens if you add poetry to it, for example? So he, in a way, opened the doors for art to become even more expansive. And we'll look at, spend some time. And then there was a person called Soy Lewitt. He was also a conceptual artist, but he also developed a movement called minimalism, that with using geometric forms and very minimal lines to express, but bereft of emotion in a certain sense. So, he drew from comic books. So this is a work called Wham by Liechtenstein, and this is Campbell. So there are 32 soup cans, each a different flavor. So he painted them in a series like that. In some cases, he would have a huge installation of a big Campbell soup. Now, why Campbell soup cans? Because the town he lived in, this was a very popular brand. So these were movements which we call postmodernism, but because now you are coming closer to popular culture, you're coming closer to the people, is where this becomes important. So now we talk about Kossuth. So this is a work. What does it have? It's a physical chair. It's a photograph of a chair and the dictionary definition of a chair. And there are some instructions how this installation. So this is an installation. It's no longer an art object like that. So now and the instructions, so he says, while the chair and the photograph, they change every time. So you can install this anywhere you like. You can use this chair, you can use another chair. The photograph will change. But the definition of a chair will be different. So now you look at the semantics of it. A dictionary definition is not defining what the chair is actually going to look at. So now we are talking about image, we are talking about the semantics of it, the text of it, and every time it changes. So that is why it becomes important. So it becomes an idea. It's a concept. And this is a work by Lewitt. So again, conceptual. Now what he did is he took 54 columns, very high, 10 to 20 feet of varying height, and he put it in the city of in Atlanta. And people were allowed to walk through in shifting shadows of the thing and kind of experience it. Now, the idea is now you're walking through a work of art rather than just looking at it from distance. So you become a participant in a certain sense. But at the same time, there was minimalism because he's using geometric forms. So if we start defining what are the characteristics of contemporary art, because now that is what we are moving on, from postmodernism to contemporary art. So it refers, so we'd already talked about that. So now it becomes, because it's coming closer to people, because there was a thought that art was becoming too exclusive. So how do we come closer? So we have to start commenting on society, on polity, on the culture around you. So local, global issues, climate change, identity, LGBTQIA. I don't know if there are any more alphabets added now. So plus, and then rights, so war. Of course, it's more than West. It's about race, social injustice, climate change, technology. Now AI has also come in, and we'll talk a little about that if we have time. And the mediums are completely changed also. It's no longer limited to the traditional printing, painting or sculpture or even woodcut printing or lino printing. So you have site-specific installation like what we saw in Lewitt's case. You have performance art, which is like a mix of, it's like bodily politics, but you have the person actually enacting. Not enacting, but performing. There's a difference. And then use of text and poetry, sound and sensation. So there is the audio coming in. Then there is the idea of touch, which comes in. You have artworks. You have non-fungible tokens. During COVID time, this became very popular, but it's not caught on. But there was a time when this is a digital asset, a unique asset stored on a blockchain. So you don't see it, but you own it. And it is a unique, because it's like crypto. And this is important. The materiality has become very important. So new innovation and use of new materials, because now there is freedom on that. So while modern art, they had a different kind of freedom in terms of thematics and what they were doing. Now here we are talking about you can use any material you like. There are no restrictions of, and there is a lot of, just like your courses, there is a lot of interdisciplinarity. So contemporary art is interdisciplinary. It's multi-stranded, and it is also what has become is scale. Some of the installations are huge. They're tunnels. There are big installations. Of course, they're sponsored by sometimes municipal bodies, but some of them are really huge. Even that one, what we saw, was 20 feet high. And this is a new phenomenon called appropriation, where you use imagery of the past and as it is, and include it in your work. And I'll show you one example of that. So, there's some examples of socio-political art, because contemporary art, a lot is happening, and especially in America. So issues like human rights, climate change, we talked about that. In America, the Black Arts movement or Black Lives Matter movement, that became very strong in the 60s and 70s. And if some of you are familiar, in 2020, there was a murder of a black man, George Floyd, by a white policeman. So that's kind of spurred a surge of a lot of art on streets, on murals, and other forms to propagate their art and their identity. Similarly, in India, we have Dalit art, and this also had started. It started with Dalit literature, but then it moved on to Dalit art. And you have, so they're like Ambedkarite artists. A lot of them you will see on Instagram now. Of course, in some cases it's like activism, but some cases it's also art. And these are some of the artists who've been working on that. And of course, you have feminist art, LGBT art, and other kind of art which who challenge the patriarchal order or talk about social issues, talk about human rights, talk about social justice. So this is a work by a Black American artist called Kara Walker. Or Kara Walker, Kara, I think, Walker. Now, I will tell you about it. This is the inset which I'll talk about. Can you people see this? Can you people read this? So it is a critique of colonial British Empire and the slavery which happened there. And this a similar thing was, it draws upon a Victoria Memorial which is located outside Buckingham Palace. But at the top now, we have what is a bare-breasted black woman, And this is done not in normal materials. You would think this is done using, I think I've read that. But it is used, she used cork and other materials, not stone or marble at all. And so I talked about appropriation. So she's talked about, she's appropriate. There's a British painter called Turner. He did a painting called The Slave Ship, where the slave ship, you had bodies being thrown overboard. And then you have these waiting sharks. So if you see the detail on top, at the bottom tier are these sharks at the bottom tier. And this is a very high, 13-meter high work. Now, this is an Indian Bombay-based artist who's I also regard her as one of the leading contemporary artists. Now, what is her work? Her work, this was done at the Venice Biennale, and she had done two works. I'll show you the other work as well. So it had a mechanical gate, as you can see, which was swinging on its own volition. So you normally see these gates in the front of a driveway of elite people, like a car driveway. So, but you had this gate which was ramming against the wall. And over time, as it progressed, it broke it. And that's why this is when it's partly done. So you see this cracked wall. And now, you can interpret it in many ways, but it's like breaking boundaries. It's also talking about ethno divides, cultural divides we have in society. And it's about belonging and intrusion. So now you're intruding into somebody else's space because you're banging. And so you can interpret it in various ways. So contemporary art can have multiple interpretations. But look at the form. The form is completely different. The gate has tall spikes. So there is this kind of thing also that you cannot go beyond. So in another installation, which I don't have an image of, she had 100 microphones hanging from the ceiling. And those microphones were reciting poetry of poets who had voiced concerns and had been imprisoned across, not only in India, across the world. So the poems were recited and in chorus. So that was another installation she had done. So now look at the change we have made. Now we got into audio, we got into text, we got into a very different kind of area. It's not that painting and sculpture is not being done, but I'm giving you some representative examples of what other practices are being done in today's age, and to inspire all of you, So she's a young artist, and Payal Yara. So this is mapping the terrain of. So I don't have the video, but I'll show you another video. If you see on the top right, there is a metal comb, and there was this rough stone slab, and it is a kinetic installation. So it's just like the gate was swinging up to and fro. Here also the comb grates through insistently across. It goes back and forth, and of course I had seen it. So it is a very streaky sound. It's a very painful kind of sound which you get to hear. And so it's like echoing your remembrance. And so I asked her why this kind of stone. So the stone is also 100 years of pressure in the Earth's crust. So there is this kind of remembrance, your lineage, which she talks about. And then there was another immersive interactive. Can you play this? This is a video which is there. So what she has these protruding hands, fake hands, and people are going through that. And so they don't know what they're going to get. So it's like a dark tunnel. So even men are going through that. So they experience what groping means in a certain sense. So that was a work by her. So it addresses issues of gender violence and questions structures of power. And also, this was all captured on camera. So there is surveillance as well, she's commenting on. Now this is another interesting, this is a British sculptor who does these installations, but he doesn't do them in regular exhibition halls. These are like a site-specific. So this is a work, he used replica casts of his own body, and the site he chose was Old City Jail, which was in the Atlantic coast, where a lot of slave trade happened, and there was a lot of lynching and killing of. They were hanged and lynched the slaves in Atlanta, because this comes to the coast, across the Atlantic Ocean. So what he did is he took that jail and he had replica casts of his own body hanging like that without the heads. So to give that kind of, it's an eerie feeling, but it evokes those times. So this is another form of art which is called performance art. is a fusion of visual art, theater, and the human body per se. So here, this Marina Abramovic, she had these participants or volunteers sleep on beds, like camp beds, whatever, with kind of headphones so that you cut out the noise, and so as long as they wished, and so you cut off, aimed at creating stillness and heightened awareness. So you start looking at within, so like a meditative thing. And this was done in the middle of an art fair where there was a hustle and bustle of that noise, and suddenly you are invited to shut yourself out from everything which is happening around you. Now, Anish Kapoor is again a very well-known India-based, he's British Indian in the sense that his father was Indian, but his mother was of Iraqi descent. So these are two works I will show you. He has got, there's a signature red he uses. Of course, he uses a lot of metal as well. But this is Mount Moriah at the ghetto. So here he refers to the space so in the Bible, God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son. And this now is like, now you can interpret it in various ways. You can even look at his internal organs, descending down from the ceiling. So it's a very eerie kind of thing. And here, this is like Hamakom in Hebrew. It is called the place of God. So it's the place of God is like an expansive space. But it more or less fills the entire floor of the gallery.
Isn't he also extremely controversial for this black, the patenting of the black?
Patenting of black and red. This red, this particular.
Someone else came up with another thing and said anyone can use it as long as you can prove you're not Anish Kapoor.
Yeah. So now the works I showed you were 2022. Okay. Rita Kumari Prasad did this work in 2006. Now, and it's a very interesting work. She used red leather and acid, so because of acid burns in red leather. And she had this work, like they look like red teardrops. It's like a kinetic installation. So because there's acid, the viscous liquid is flowing down actually, and it was flowing down from one floor to the other floor. And so it's a reflection on the toxic climate and corrosive violence. You can interpret it in various ways. But again, this was a very different material she used. And it went on for more than a week. So it's not limited to one space, but now there is a longitudinalness to art now. And then at the same time in India, there are people who are still talking about partition is still a burning issue. So this had gone to a partition museum in Delhi. I don't know if any of people visit Delhi, please do go there. Of course, it's very distant from you people, but during the partition in Punjab, when there was a lot of violence, and there's a film maybe which I saw. Yeah, that's right. So that also talks about the violence and partition. So here also you have these bodies, and he calls it so he calls it Zuljana, which is one with wings. So it's like it's like an satire, as if it could have flown across, but it's carrying the dead. You have another artist who's talking about Abdul Ghaffar Khan. It's a woodcut. At the time of partition, he didn't want to go, and he was fighting for Pashtun rights. But Gandhi persuaded him. He said, no, you must go there and you be the custodian of peace. But as soon as he went there, he got imprisoned. So his last years were in prison. And then you have, this artist had come from Bangladesh. So he talks about, now he's using terracotta and he's using barbed wire. And he's kind of entangled in that space because this partition was imposed on India. It was not that people really wanted it. So it was more of a political thing, and it was the British who kind of did it. This is very interesting. I came across this. This is in Burma. I don't know how familiar are you with what is happening in now called Myanmar. So there is a spring revolution happening. So Aung San Suu Kyi was arrested in, I think, April 24. Now I believe she is in house arrest. And but the revolution, the spring, when after she got arrested, so there was this spate of protests. Among many things, tattoo art became a very important part of protest. So they would tattoo their bodies and stand in public spaces, bare from their waist, because they were not allowed to speak. And so this is on the back of a person called Ong Mei, whom I met. He's a refugee in Delhi now. And this is a very exclusive photograph of his back, which he showed me, and this of another of his friends, and of a girl. And this is, of course, the portrait. But here, interesting is, you see this. This is a very common symbol of protest. This is not the first time in Southeast Asia, whenever there have been protests, is liberty, fraternity, and equality. It was a French movement. So, and of course, these are people who died in jail or under captivity or fighting the revolution. And of course, so that's why the Spring Revolution. And of course, there's a portrait of Aung San Suu Kyi. So this person who's doing the mic, she's one of the activists. This is my work. This is based in Sudan. Sudan, I don't know how many people follow Sudan. It's about the poorest. It is the poorest country in the world. There's right now, from April 23, there's it's not a civil unrest. There are two military camps who are fighting each other. There is no water. There is no humanitarian aid. Women are compelled to trade their bodies for a jerry can of water. So what I've shown are these row of jerry cans. You see this row of jerry cans and trading a body. And this is, I've juxtaposed another image. Earlier in the Civil War, in the 1980s, there were about 100 Sudanese boys, 13 to adolescents. They ran away upward to Egypt, and one of them, and most of them got caught on the way because there were crocodiles when they tried to jump in the river. There were bandits, so they got attacked. But one of them managed to reach American shores somehow, narrated the story. It has got documented into a book called Lost Boys. It's made into a film called Lost Boys, and if you are interested, you can see it. So I juxtaposed that, and of course this is the capital city of Khartoum. This is the map of Sudan at the bottom, and of course because there are two people fighting, they keep suspecting every civilian to be a spy of the other, and there are these detention centers where they get locked up. Now I'll come to, which should interest all of you, AI. So in June 26, the first of its kind AI museum has been opened in Los Angeles called Dataland. And they talk about the rainforest of the Amazon. There is the site here. This is a website, so all of you, if you're interested, you can look at it. So they have 6 galleries here, and this will get some, but each visitor is supposed to wear sensors. And since you like possibly cologne and perfume, you can choose the perfume you want to, the scent. So there are scents as well. So there is a physicality to it because you can sense it through your body. You can even smell now. And it's completely done by AI. So if you are interested, you can look at this site. I'll go ahead. So it's impossible to predict where AI will take us, because it could well surpass human imagination. We know that it could do that. But I'll come to that. But it could be a major disruptor, just like we saw Marcel Duchamp or we saw Kossuth. So it could open up new ways of thinking. But one is more worried about its lack of humaneness. We talked about emotion and feeling and being human. AI is never going to be doing that. And is AI going to take us away from that kind of humanity? So that is one thing. And there, of course, there are other concerns like ethical concerns and legal concerns. And there's rampant plagiarism. So I've done it. Now I've shown it. It's now part of AI. It's in public. They can do whatever they like. And I cannot benefit from that. So, but this warrants a full discussion, but we won't talk about it now here. But so it's become, but the other question is that now that contemporary art has become completely concept-based, idea-based, how do you evaluate that this is good art, this is not good art? With a painting, you could say, this looks nice, it has form, color, it has a good theme. But now when it's an idea, it's no longer a physical art object. How do you determine what is good? So, like universally, and also we don't have the advantage, like Van Gogh now, even 100 years from now, there's universal recognition, he was a good artist. But we don't even have that space, that longevity to judge that this work actually 50 years from now will still be regarded as high art. So that is a big, so these are questions to think about. The other thing, of course, is the market. To what extent market structures determine art. Because at the end of the day, you've got to sell a work. Now, how do you sell works which are concept-based, which have socio-political dimensions? So in the West, you have a lot of museums, you have a lot of art foundations who support that kind of art. In India, unfortunately, they're very few and far between. And so what ends up them doing is that artists then start doing what I call, not derogatory, wall art, which is doing art to sell, which matches your decor, which matches your upholstery, your carpets. But that is not art which can relate to the public. So what happens is that kind of art, then again, we are distancing ourselves from common people. So you see, you go to theater, you can read books, literature, you see films, there is still a connectivity. But art somehow, particularly in India, has become distant from common people. Now, how do we do that? Because still you get some support from government bodies, but that's not forthcoming. So that is a problem. Of course, at the same time, there has been some development. There was, somebody talked about the Kala Gora Arts Festival. So that was started in Mumbai in, I think, 1999. And that gave open access. And then we have in the south, in Kochi, the Kochi Museris Biennale held every 2 years. There also, any of you visited Kochi? Yeah, you've been there. Oh, good. So here you suddenly see, college students like you going through art and getting an exposure, and their curation very often has socio-political dimensions. So the last Biennale, they did a lot of performance art. There were 9 performance art events there.
There's also the student biennale, which has a lot
of students who perform,
who actually put up art.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a lot of, so there's at least, so what is happening is in our country, our art education, there's nothing which happens in schools, because what I've been talking about, even the art education, where even when schools do teach art, it is more for motor development, and you will do a little clay modeling or something like that, or work with plasticine. But it is not giving you exposure to what is, they will not take you to museums or galleries or expose you to art like that, isn't it? So you have some foundations. You have the KNMA in Delhi. You have the Devi Art Foundation. You have FICA, which do support art, but they're few and far between. We need much more. And straight-run institutions are not supporting. In the beginning, when modern art was happening, you had the Lalit Kala Academy, you had the National Gallery of Modern Art, which is supporting artists, but that's not happening, and they have a they have a political agenda. So they're not acquiring also art. So they have lost their autonomy, just like in other institutions also we see that. But so it will be a very sad day if politics and markets take over the art world, which already has become very, very exclusive. So that is what I fear more than the disruption AI can actually bring. So in fact, I am hoping that AI will do a lot of all this wall decor, so artists can then focus on other things. So that's all. I don't know if I'm sorry I've taken up all the time. There's no time for questions. But there is some time. Where's Santoshi? She's here. Santoshi, can we serve and then I can take questions?
Till 4 o'clock we can be.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, because 4 o'clock, so if your refreshments, okay, so they can bring up, then I'll take questions meanwhile. Yeah, I'm taking questions. All of you, I'm very curious, I'm sure. Or comments, anything.
You can ask questions.
Of course.
Sudan.
Can I sit? Can I sit? I've been standing.
Yeah, of course. Have sit. Be comfortable.
Yeah. Sorry.
On Sudan,
I'm not so photogenic, so it's okay.
Right now, the fight is between RSF, I think, like it's UAE backed secretly, and then the Sudanese legitimate government, the UN recognized one.
Yeah, you're talking about you're talking about Sudan, huh?
Yeah, both have committed atrocities. So, who is the legitimate representative of the people?
I don't know. What I know is the common person is suffering. The women are suffering. They're being raped and brutalized, and which is not only in Sudan. We see that happening in our country as well. So that is the worry. Sudan has had a history of this kind of strife. So they've had many revolutions like that. There was a period when South Sudan got separated. Now that was more of an ethnic religious divide. Now this is not that's why I said it's not a society problem. It's not like a North-South divide, which happened when South Sudan.
UAE wants the Sudan's gold.
Yeah. So in all cases, it's either about oil or it's about gold or it's about some mineral wealth. I mean, the entire Middle East conflict, a lot of it has got to do with oil, isn't it? So the problem is people suffer. I mean, who are suffering in the Middle East? The children, the Palestinian children. And there is genocide happening. This was, if any of you are interested, I'd done my last show in Delhi, which was, the Sudan was part of it. It was on missing people. So it was about, you see these ads in newspapers, you have these mugshots or photographs of who are these missing people? Are they ever found through these ads? They will never be found, because they would be missing in some remote village who will not even be having access to an English newspaper. So I researched on that for 3 years, and I found out that 60% of these missing people are young girls and women who get picked up for trafficking. Men get picked up for organ trafficking. One is illegal trafficking of organs, but the other trafficking is of organs. Then there are a host of other issues: migration, So South America to North America migration. A lot of people die in the ocean or in the swampy terrain as they're trying to cross into America. So in India, I mean, then there is missing people in Kashmir, missing people in the Northeast, huge number across the world. So I just like Sudan, of course, also huge number of missing people now. So yeah, sure. I'm sure any of you are interested, you can give me, I can share. But this is only the sixth show. Every show I've had a different thematic, some of them, but all related to some social issue or the other.
You have been to Khartoum?
Huh?
You have been to Khartoum?
No, I'm not. So, yeah, people will say, no, I've not been there. But I had a kind of video. So, there is a refugee who's now opened a cafe in Manali. And there was a poet friend who was to go and have coffee and hear his stories. So, I talked to him, the Sudanese national. And now he's got Indian citizenship, so he's not under threat. But a lot of other Sudanese who have immigrated, they've been asked to go back. So he told me a lot of what was happening there.
Yeah.
Because
Right now, people focus on Israel and Palestine and the Ukraine.
Yeah.
People forget about Sudan.
Yeah, so that's why you see now people are saying, well, you are not Sudanese, why are you? So my scene is, who is going to give them a voice if the artists are not going to do it? You know, it's like saying, well, why are you doing women? You don't understand women. So I'm telling you, if I can. So a woman curator said, you don't understand periods, so you can't paint women. I said, okay. I'm a novelist, then I should have only male characters. I should not, and only male children, because otherwise because I've not experienced. I should not have dogs and cats in a novel. So I mean, there are different people who will say different things, but I don't subscribe to that notion. My thing is, if you can imagine yourself. So I did during my college days, I did a lot of theatre. So there, you assume the role of another character. So if you're able to do that, and that is the challenge for an artist or a writer or a poet or a theatre person or a film actor. So people will question. So just like your question, have you been to Sudan?
Like that. I'm just questioning about your experience over there. It's like, did you see?
So my first novel was based in Chhattisgarh, and it was about the Maoists, whom we call Naxalites sometimes. And now it was based on the first-hand accounts of people who had been there and who had written a long piece, and they had shared their thing, that somebody had spent about 2-3 weeks there. Another person had actually got converted. So I happened to meet them. So based on that, my novel is not 60%, it was about 60% that, about that. It's challenging, but
It's harder to imagine.
So I did, because in my grown-up years, when in my college years, of course, I was not in my institution, but in Delhi University and Calcutta, Maoism was very widespread then.
Siddhartha Shankar Rai was very adamant in suppressing.
Yeah, he did that, and a lot of people got killed brutally. You're from Bengal, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would know the history.
Little bit.
Oh. Well, I was living during that time. So, any questions, please? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a question?
I don't.
You need a mic?
Can you hear?
No, the others cannot. Maybe.
You can hear.
Up to you. I'm very loud. Maybe I don't need the mic.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. So we know art is something that's very difficult to define. We can't really have a concrete definition for it.
That's right.
And a group of friends and I, we were discussing what is art, and we were bringing in works, and we were trying to figure out if there's some common criteria we could find. I think we are familiar with the piece of artwork where there's a banana duct tape.
Oh, so I didn't talk about that. Catalan, it was 2019. So he had this. So this was another major disruption in art. So where he got, do you know how much he sold that for? It was done in three. It was done in 3 editions, and the one edition he sold for $6.2 million. And there was a. It was bought by a cryptocurrency dealer.
Where do we find these people who will pay $6.4 billion?
I don't mind. I don't mind 62,000 yeah, for a banana.
I think marginalized people have less
Half.
access.
Huh?
I think marginalized people have less access to the markets.
But you see, now the critics. You see, that is the whole thing. Now, who defines good art? So I'm actually working on a paper on this. How do you evaluate? This is where I refer when it's a concept. How do you say this is good? This is first that it is art, and then again it is good art, because I can claim this is art, and I have a right to say it is. So I've written a poem. It's my poem. So you can't say this is not a poem, right? Now, is it a good poem? Is it worth exhibiting? Is it worth the price? Who evaluates that? So the answer is, some people will say, look, it's the institution. The institutional, if the museum is acquiring, then certainly they are better informed, they are better judges, and they know they are better appreciators. At the same time, we must keep in mind, who is the museum? The museum also needs funds, just like your university also has its donations and funds. So if you were to teach something or do something which is against the sense and sensibilities of the founder, of the curator, then you will be in trouble, isn't it? So the museum is also to cherry pick what they're going to do. So something which is, so if Trump has financed a museum, can you do art which goes against the sensibilities, and will it ever be picked up? Now, is that good art or not? Yeah, it could be, isn't it? So just because the museum is not picking up doesn't make it good art. So at the end of the day, I think everybody has to decide for themselves. So what would be the criteria? And also, you see, it becomes very subjective, because now it is immersive. There is an emotional side to it. There's an intellectual side to it. So you are looking at art based on your feeling, your experience, your sensation, your thought process. Does it appeal to you? So the way I look at it, any good work of art will be multi-layered. It cannot. That's why I keep bad mouthing wall art, because I'm saying we can't call that art. You'll look at it for 10 minutes, after that you'll forget it. But a good work of art will make you think. So anything which will make you think, which will evoke feeling or sensation or a new experience, or there is a materiality about it. So I've not shown you a couple of slides. There is a person who works, he calls it oriculture. He takes origami, the spiral folding, but he does it in large, so he does it in paper folds, and he does works like that. There's a person called Onkon Mitra. So or you work with different materials. So to get, but that material, not because it is a new material, because so I showed you somebody with that barbed wire. Now he uses terracotta. But now I asked him why he used terracotta. It has a cracked surface. It is porous, So we're talking about borders, and it is talking about the rough texture of terracotta. It's not a smooth finish like. So the same work would not work if it was in marble, say, isn't it, or granite? So sorry, have I answered the question?
You did.
Partly.
Yeah, I think you kind of got there where I was trying to go. So.
Well, there is really no definition. Yeah. So the way I say, and what is contemporary art, so there is an Australian critic who said there has to be a contemporaneity to it, if I'm able to pronounce it correctly.
Like there should be some relevance.
Some social relevance or political relevance, or an experience. It is a new experience. There is something, there's a newness about it.
Anyone like
Anyone else? Sorry.
I don't like using the mic. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
So I have two questions.
Hmm.
The first is, I mean, in your conclusion, you talked about your fear about art not having like a particular sense of sensibility in India, where there's structures that support people who can actually create and intellectually immerse themselves in artworks.
Yeah.
What is the role of an institution like a college that can help with this bridge?
See, now, why are we, to begin with, why are we reached this state is the question. So, my view is that in India, as compared to, say, the West, if you go to France or Germany, children are exposed to art at a very young age. Parents encourage them to take them to museums. There is art education, not of the kind as is taught here, which is like motor skills, but developing like knowledge of the history of art, for example, just like you teach history. There is none of that in our school system. So here we are talking about college education, but we start from school. So yeah, so an institution like that, I would, and I think you are very fortunate that you have a global arts program and you have an interwoven program where you are able to register for courses. But you go to Delhi University, there you cannot register for a course in art. There is no course available. So yes, so institutions like that, and yes, if you were based in Chennai, I would expect the institution to take you to some good art shows. Unfortunately, that cannot happen because of the location. Or get artists to come and speak about their works, you know. So that kind of interaction would help. Basically, once you develop an interest, so right now newspapers are not interested in covering art. They write only about films. So now who's to blame? Because we don't have the culture of art in India. It is not that the culture of art was not there in India in the past. Art and culture permeated. I mean, what makes a civilization if it was not for art and culture, or music, or theatre, or dance and drama? Otherwise, you would be. We get so caught up in our lives and about earning a living that your friends, your children, when you have them, when you bring them to this big bad world, I'm hoping that you will expose them to art. So I think the onus is not only on one person, it's on the individual as well. So I'm doing my bit, I'm talking to you. I run an art blog. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, which is like a free site. Anyway, you're interested, you can visit it. It's called artamour.in. artamour.in. It's a free site. You can subscribe to it or not subscribe to it. But you will see some interviews with artists like this Payal Arya. I told you she had these hands. So I've got a very long interview with her on this site. So you can pick and choose.
Yeah.
Sir?
So you talked about how Rabindranath Tagore introduced and sort of revolutionized Indian art to.
I don't think he did. And yeah. So everybody contributed to the so Raja Ravi Verma democratized because of the Hindu deities, but Abhindranath Tagore was the person who did Bharat Mata. So what they tried to do was bring in the indigenous tradition. So they tried, because they were trained in Western art schools, and then they borrowed forms from Ajanta, from our folk art traditions, and they tried to create something, but keeping in mind the modern art. So they were not reflecting really the Indian ethos. So apart from people like Chitta Prasad, or there were other Bengali artists like Somnath Hoare, who depicted floods and famine and other issues, social issues. For them, still the central doctrine was art for art's sake. So you're creating form, you know. So it's like folk art. Now, folk art, if you look at the history of folk art, it reflected what was happening, the motives they did in their villages. Now, with the same motives we continue, although the ethos has changed. I don't know. Do I answer your question?
Uh, Sorry,
I go in tangents. Huh? Huh?
I got a part of it a little wrong.
Okay.
What I was gearing towards was, with them learning about modern art, how did they revolutionize art, Indian art, from the stage that it was? Because from my understanding, in in most artworks, there's a sense of like no perspective, and there's also no sense of dimensionality.
Yeah.
Which then after, when they trained in modern art, was introduced in Indian art.
Yeah.
How did this revolutionize the way we look at Indian art? Not only through the artworks themselves, but how, like, the way the culture formed in art.
See, my answer would be, one, they were trained by colonial art schools. So you had a Madras thing, you had in Bombay. Now, they were trained by the colonial, and in fact, the colonial art is also, they focused more on landscape painting, the British, as compared to the French and German. So they didn't have much of expressionist art. But they were exposed, because some of them had, like Amrita Shergill, had training elsewhere as well, you know. So what they brought in was a kind of an amalgamation of Western art, and perspective was completely, you're right, there was no sense of perspective. But that is what Western art education taught you, the feeling of perspective. So that is what they brought in. But then modern art broke away that perspective as well. Because what they talked about, and like Cubism we will talk about, looking at art from all angles or flattening the plane. So they said, well, look, this is a two-dimensional plane. Why should we bother about the third dimension? So you have, like even Matisse and even Jamini Roy and a lot of folk art tradition, there is no third dimension. So some of it was, now if you look at Ajanta and you look at those forms there and look at what Matisse did much later, you'll find a lot of similarities. So there was this simplification form even in our historical past. So what they did is they brought in those elements, and everybody had so there is not one Indian art. So Amrita Shergill is very different from Jamini Roy. Jamini Roy is very different from Raja Ravi Verma. His contribution, apart from his painting, was he did multiple prints of deities, which was not available to the common man. So that was his contribution, you know. So he's famous for that. So is there a different Indian art? No. I mean, that's my view. Even today, we continue to follow what is happening in the West. Even the themes we pick up are more LGBT, more climate change. Nobody's talking about communal violence in India. Why? And that's where the market structure, that's why my question is, how influenced are we by market structure? The main market continues to be in the West. So there is some Dalit art happening, but that is activism. They're not looking for sales like that. But when artists are looking for sales, they will start doing things which they think. So that's why a lot of modern art is what is actually selling. 90% of art which is selling in the West today, there are huge auctions, is Tayyab Mehta, all these modern artists, Hussain, not the contemporary artists, not Indian contemporary artists. So what are they doing? They are going back to the traditional modern art medium, because they said this is what is selling. Now, I don't blame them. They have to earn a living. So we're in a quandary. And we are in a quandary because we don't have collectors, we don't have people who understand and appreciate good art. And that's my take on it. Does that answer somewhat?
Um, so thank you for the talk. I had a question that ties in like 2 points that were brought up. So of course, when we talk about democratization of access to art, like Raja Ravi Verma had a huge role in it. Like,
Yeah.
he made sure that the paintings of deities, etc., escaped the elite and were
Yeah.
circulated in the mainstream. But I think towards the end, in your concluding remarks, AI being the disruptor, what is happening, or what at least I've noticed, is that AI art is very easily like identifiable. It's free. It's easily being circulated. A lot of the people have started making posters through
Yeah.
AI and everything. So with the rise in that, the gatekeeping or the elitism that is around actual art or like analog structures, that's sort of returning, where they will charge you like hefty amounts of fees for just visiting an installation. So would
No, till now there's nothing like that.
at least like
Yeah, this AI museum, they charge a hefty fee. This AI museum, for example, if you visit the museum, you look at the fee structure there. You have to buy tickets to experience that art. But most of the shows which are held in India, they're free. There is no, but yet people don't go to them.
But my main point is that, do you see that with the influence of AI and it being the more accessible medium, uh, the like barriers that are there to access actual art, or art that has all of these elements that we talked about, will that sort of become more there, and will it be more inaccessible to the mainstream?
What I'm hoping for, just because I'm an optimist, so if you want to buy a work of art to decorate your home, right now you would go to an artist or and pick up some work which you think you like because you like it. Tomorrow you don't have to pick up somebody else's work. You can sit on your system, create that work for yourself, customize it, and create it. Go to a print studio and get a printout, frame it, and put it up. So a lot of what I have been talking about as wall art and decorative art, I'm hoping AI will take over. So in which case, it will free the artist to actually do genuine conceptual work and art which is closer to the people. Now you look at this data land which we talked about. It is an experience, it is a good feeling, but is it intellectual? Will they talk about so none of AI will talk about art which talks about issues of people. So you will still need artists. You will still so you can have a writer. So you can get AI to write a full novel. Within a week it will write it. But will it be original? Will it talk about something which is very deep, which is very emotive? No. So that's what I'm saying. They won't have what I talk about, the humaneness about it.
No lived experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or even the thought process, the idea. So it.
I may add to what you
Yeah, sure.
Well, my concept actually, as an artist, I feel that the more that AI is taking over, churning out finished products, the process and the act of making art and being involved in the process of it and the act of creation becomes that much more precious.
Yes.
Because, and so I'm actually seeing it's not just about courses here, but in general in public, I'm seeing there is a return to working with your hands, a return to wanting to touch material, which is there because people are otherwise you're always on a screen. Even otherwise, jobs which involve touching material is now all mechanized. So AI has pushed everything further and further away from the human touch, and that's what people crave now. So the actual final product of art does not become as important as the process. And the process is something that people want to be more involved in, and I think that's a great.
Yeah. So you see, now there are software tools available, like even simple things like Procreate and like that, where you can create. But I don't like to because I don't enjoy it. I mean, like, so the very act of taking a brush and the feel of putting the paint on the canvas is very different from taking a pencil and trying to do it on, or just writing a prompt for AI to do. So I mean the same thing would be about dance or music. You can create music, but will it replace singing? Or will it replace, playing the guitar, for example, because there is a feel to it, or the piano? So yeah, so DJs, they may become obsolete because AI will create, will double up as DJs on your dance floor, isn't it? So you can program it to create it, and it may even sense the mood of the dancer and change. So depending on, because it'll have a visual kind of thing. So it may do many of these things. So many of the mechanical things will be taken over, but the real creative stuff, I think it will free the artist to do that more. And I think what I'm hoping is more and more people will want to create art, because many of the other functions, yeah, of course, we are talking about people who can afford it, because AI disruption, and I'm not getting into that larger issue which will create a divide. So many of you will be able to use AI. There will be many who will not have access to AI, because now you have free ChatGPT, but tomorrow good AI systems you will be paying through your nose for, isn't it? So, any other question? Otherwise, we can. Yeah, it's time we have to move out.
What is your stance on Klein blue?
Huh? Sorry?
Klein blue, the color.
Sorry?
Have you heard of the color Klein blue?
Klein blue? No, I'm not. Sorry.
It's kind of like Anish Kapoor did that with black.
Yeah.
So Klein did it with blue. So this is like artists commercializing a particular color.
Yeah, you say that you're patenting it, so there are issues about that. That is the controversy with Anish Kapoor, saying that this is.
And they said, how can you patent the colors? Which is why the other colors that the other guys come up with, he has said anyone can use it for free except Anish Kapoor.
Yeah.
So you just have to prove that you're not Anish Kapoor.
Yeah.
When you can use it.
Yeah, this is like a take on that,
No, means, should artists commercialize a color to earn a living?
I wouldn't. So I don't have a problem if people were to copy my art. I mean, freely. Because if they copy and they are spreading the message, it's like Raja Ravi Verma. He democratized art. So I want more people to see it. So you want to copy and make another version, make another version. More people, I mean, the message is going across. Yeah? Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for being a very patient and participative audience. Thank you.